In the autumn of 1444, on the shores of the Black Sea, two armies face each other. Now imagine you are the 20-year-old king about to lead the Crusader army against an Ottoman force twice your size, commanded by Sultan Murad II himself. You are brave, even seasoned for your age, but with more fire than foresight, you believe heaven is on your side. Today you think you will carve your name into history as the young lion of Christendom who drove the Ottomans from Europe. Instead, you will be remembered for one disastrous decision, and this day will become your downfall. This is the story of Władysław III, the king who doomed Europe. It all kicked off 2 years earlier in 1442, when Julian Cesarini was dispatched to Hungary. Cesarini was a papal legate, but not just anyone. He was in fact the Pope's fixer, and right now his mission was to hold the eastern wall of Europe against the Ottoman sledgehammer. Here was the problem. The Hungarian king had died suddenly, leaving behind not a seasoned heir but a baby stuck on the loading screen. I mean, in the womb. And if there's one thing medieval nobles feared more than fighting the Turks, it was fighting them while being bossed around by a fetus. So, instead they went with someone only slightly less terrifying, this video's main character, the 18-year-old king of Poland, Władysław III. Young, devout, and by all accounts, brave, the kind of king who would charge headfirst into enemy lines. Cesarini saw him as a perfect poster boy for the faith, so he solved the crisis by handing Hungary's crown to the 18-year-old. But even after being so desperate to have to choose between an 18-year-old and a fetus, Pope Eugene IV somehow convinced himself it was the Ottomans who were vulnerable. Why? Because for the last 5 years, a Hungarian nobleman named Jan Hunyadi had managed to halt and even push back Ottoman forces in the Balkans. So, on January 1443, Pope Eugene shouted from Rome,
"This is nice, but have you tried another crusade?"
"Dude, you've seen how the last ones went, right? It's not exactly a winning franchise." But credit where it's due, the Christians actually racked up some early wins. Thanks almost entirely to Hunyadi's leadership, they pushed hard into Ottoman territory to the point where Sultan Murad II offered them a 10-year truce and a tribute of 100,000 gold florins. Not to mention, he also had to withdraw his troops from both Serbia and Albania. Both sides swore on their holy books not to break the truce. And that truce was exactly what Europe needed most. Time. Time to rebuild, to breathe, maybe even to stop panicking for 5 minutes. But then came arrogance. The ink on the treaty wasn't even dry before Cesarini was plotting to tear it up. He wanted the Ottomans out of Europe yesterday, and to him, peace treaties with infidels were worth less than parchment scraps. Add to that Hunyadi's recent hot streak, and Cesarini convinced himself that they were untouchable, that the Turks were finally on the ropes. So he pulled the young, devout Władysław aside and whispered that this was their golden chance to crush the Ottomans once and for all. And the young king, ignoring the warnings of his nobles and commanders, made his first catastrophic decision, deciding that a promise to an infidel wasn't really a promise at all. In his mind, this wasn't just another military gamble, it was Christendom's last chance to prove God still had their back. And the only way to do it was by breaking the oath they just swore on the Bible. Hunyadi, is still trying to figure out what on earth Władysław or Cesarini were thinking, had to follow his king out of loyalty. Meanwhile, on the Ottoman side, things were just as chaotic. Sultan Murad II, who had been running the empire for 20 years and thought that he had finally secured peace with Christians, abdicated in favor of his 12-year-old son, Mehmet. Yes, the future conqueror of Constantinople. So when the Christians broke the truce and started marching through Ottoman territory, little Mehmet panicked and fired off the medieval equivalent of a desperate text to his dad. "If you are the Sultan, come and lead your armies. If I am the Sultan, then I hereby order you to come and lead my armies." So Murad comes back from retirement and the crusade was officially on. At first, things looked promising. The Crusader army led by Władysław marched down the Balkans with a confidence only possible when you've just torn up your peace treaty like a bad parking ticket. Eventually, by November 1444, the Crusaders met the Ottomans outside the city of Varna, on the coast of the Black Sea. The Christian army was about 20,000 strong, whilst the Ottomans led by Murad II brought double that, if not more. The battle began on November 10th, and at first, the Christians held their own. Hunyadi's disciplined troops smashed into the approaching Ottoman flanks, pushing them back. For a moment, it looked like they might actually pull it off. Even Murad wavered and retreated to his encampments. But Władysław made a disastrous decision. The king of Hungary and Poland, 20 by then, and with more zeal than survival instincts, decided it was time to lead a personal charge straight into the heart of the Ottoman encampments, where Murad and his elite janissaries still held firm. It was glorious. It was also suicide. The Ottomans closed ranks, cut off Władysław's charge, and in the chaos, the young king was unhorsed by one of Murad's bodyguards. He was then killed and decapitated on the spot, his head mounted on a spear and paraded before the Crusaders. The Christian line collapsed. Hunyadi fought a desperate retreat, but with their king's head on display, panic spread like wildfire. By nightfall, the Crusader army was annihilated. Cesarini, the mastermind of this holy gamble, was killed in the rout. After the battle, Murad had Władysław's head stuck on a pike at the Hungarian border. The arrogance and the terrible decision-making that had launched this crusade ended in a catastrophe. And worse, it wasn't just a lost battle. Varna killed off the entire idea of crusading. After that, Europe never again managed a united, serious crusade against the Ottomans. The Pope could shout all he wanted, but no one was buying tickets to the show anymore. And you might think, well, that's probably a good thing, right? Well, yeah, but that didn't solve anything. Because for the next 2 centuries, the Ottomans were Europe's unstoppable nightmare fuel. In 1453, they grabbed Constantinople and rebranded it as Istanbul. In 1526, they practically erased Hungary from the map with one battle. And by the 17th century, they were banging on Vienna's gates not once but twice. First in 1529, then again in 1683. They never broke in, but every visit sent Europe into a full-blown panic attack. For centuries after, the Ottomans weren't just neighbors. They were the shadow looming over European politics. All because back in 1444, arrogance and blind faith convinced a young king to trade peace for glory. And in doing so, he didn't just lose a battle or his life. He doomed his people to fight a losing war for generations.